Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Theo Fisher for another episode of the Harry Potter 25th Anniversary Retrospective. And today we reach the penultimate episode in the series as we arrive at Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, released in 2010, directed by David Yates. Theo, how are you doing today?
Not too bad, mate. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I've made this work. It's really weird to say this. I spent 35 weeks doing another series leading into this year, and I've just smashed out the Harry Potters in like 2.5 weeks, and we're in the context of uploading, we're 4 days away from rounding out this little anniversary retrospective. So it's been flying. I'm delighted to have you back on the channel. I've tried to have a different guest every episode to sort of differentiate it nicely said, without dissing any guests. There's no intention of me criticizing them. And we're going to have a lovely sort of bookmark ending, bringing back tape for Deathly Hallows Part 2, because then me and him did Philosophers, Deathly Hallows, and Azkaban. The only one we let 3 people on, because that's the one everyone wanted to be on. Nicely put.
Most people's favourite, yeah.
It is. I mean, we went for 2 hours on that, so I can't really keep adding to that. But that was quite something. The longest by a country mile. But this is something I've never really spoken with you about, and kind of jumping in on the kickoff. What is your own history with the Harry Potter film series? Because I genuinely don't think I've ever spoke to you about it, which is kind of makes it madder that I've got you on. That sounding weird.
That's true, I guess. I guess like everyone, like we're relatively the same age, so like obviously I grew up with it as well. I think I wasn't a massive Harry Potter book. You know, I think my mum read the books to me up to like the Goblet of Fire or maybe Order of the Phoenix, but I have no memory of that really. And I never then read the books myself. I think I was probably one of the only people that was like sat in the cinema like shitting themselves like, whoa, when Voldemort came back for Goblet of Fire, because I had absolutely no idea that was about to happen. But I'm pretty sure I was probably the only person in the cinema that didn't know that was about to happen. But it worked for me. It's one of those, like, I think as a kid, everyone was sort of obsessed with it, weren't they? And like,
Yeah.
even as not like, I can't pinpoint myself as a mega Harry Potter fan. I enjoy the films and I can quote them. Like, they're highly quotable. Even rewatching this one, I was like, wow, it's crazy how much of the screenplay I actually can remember. But yeah, asking to come on this one, when you asked me which one, I'm just a bit of a staunch defender of this one. So yeah, I was glad to jump on.
I'm very happy. I mean, I don't mind saying it. There were 3 entries I was nervous about getting people on for: Chamber of Secrets, Half-Blood Prince, and Deathly Hallows Part 1. And I don't think it's anything against Part 1. I think because everyone leans to Part 2 because it's the action, it's the ending, it's the Battle of Hogwarts. And when you said you would read out the first, I was like, that's great, because I'm a big defender of this too, and not just because I like Harry Potter. I obviously will have a discussion shortly about splitting them in two, themselves, the decision to do so, but a Part 1 is lobbed in with that. It didn't come out. I mean, it was only 6 months difference, which is shorter than the Mission Impossible gap, shorter than the Dune Part 1 and Part 2 gaps.
Yeah, shorter than any Avengers gap. Probably the shortest between any sort of, like, yeah.
And it's the first big one, which we'll get into shortly, which I believe is justified as an initial entry point. And for anybody watching home, we'll kick off with the HBO Max synopsis, which is: Harry, Ron, and Hermione leave Hogwarts behind on a dangerous mission to destroy the Horcruxes, the secrets to Voldemort's power and immortality. I've got to say, 7 episodes in, I'm loving the HBO Max synopsises. That there's no IMDb 5 lines, let's tell you the story. There's no 5-word catchphrase. It's just here's a 1-sentence description that actually is a good synopsis. Not to plug HBO Max because the series is coming out, but my own history with this film, and I'd love to hear yours as well, being similar ages. When this came out of the cinemas, this was, I believe, November 2010. Part 1 came out. And I went on the opening night of both my sisters. We obviously then watched Part 2 together. It was an event film, and I know the context of event film is probably very different today to 2010, especially when I'd have been 14, so I'm still at school. The Harry Potter finale films and Part 2, there'll be a big discussion. They were the event films of school that everybody in your year was talking about it. Everyone came to school after that opening weekend talking about them. And I distinctly remember, it's really bad, spoiling Dobby's death for one of my best friends before we watched it. Oh, no. And it didn't come from a place of nastiness. I think it was like, oh, where do you think it's going to end? That sort of conversation. I was like, I think Dobby's going to die in this one, and I ruined it for someone. And also being very mature at the age of 14, when it opens of not Voldemort's death, Dumbledore's death again, I laughed because I was an immature 14-year-old. But as I've grown older, I think I actually really, really do like part one. I think it does a lot of the heavy lifting that part two can then sort of build off and expand. But it's so hard not to watch them as a double bill. Like, even watching it today, knowing I'm recording,
Yeah.
it was so tempting just to go straight into part two. But what was it like for you? Can you remember when you first saw it, or your background with it?
I was 13. I'll be honest, I can't remember watching it in the cinema. I obviously definitely did. I think my appreciation for this one came a little bit later. I obviously watched them all when they came out in the cinemas. I probably then didn't revisit Harry Potter until I think it was in COVID, actually, when I was living with friends. We went through them all as something to do on an evening, like one every day of the week. And I remember watching this one and thinking like, I was like, wow, that's actually an extremely well-made film as well as being the spectacle of Harry Potter. And I think that's why I've sort of grown to like to rewatch this one. Like you just said about picking it out, like I haven't watched any of them up until yesterday for quite a while, and then obviously I've just plucked this one for this video. Um, and you're right how it leads into two, because my first thought when I finished it just before I've jumped on with you is I'll probably watch part two later tonight as well. you know, but yeah, I think I mean we'll dive into like exactly why, but it's the adult drama, I guess, of this one that is why I think maybe I've appreciated it more, when I got into my 20s rather than when I was 13 when it came out, I guess.
I think I'm with you. There's one scene in particular I'm definitely going to speak about later on that I think might epitomise being a bit older. But if we go into a little bit of behind the scenes, this is really weird. So I'm going to say this as a disclaimer. With part one and part two being shot together, I know technically that is behind the scenes. Everything is blurred into one when doing research. So me and you're going to talk about more of the pre-production behind the scenes today, and then on the part two video, we'll get into a really big important thing that might be its own discussion. But leading into the creation, obviously, the Half-Blood Prince was released. They kept David Yates to direct the final film. What's really interesting, and this is actually almost a weekly segment now, for the fourth time in 7 episodes, we're talking about Guillermo del Toro not directing a Harry Potter film. He declined Prisoner of Azkaban, he declined Order of the Phoenix, and he declined The Half-Blood Prince. Now, Order of the Phoenix and The Half-Blood Prince was due to Hellboy 2, which is totally understandable. But this time round, Guillermo was up for doing the Harry Potter, the finale, and he would then turn it down again because he was so deep into pre-production on the Hobbit trilogy. And you might be wondering, wait, Guillermo del Toro directed the Hobbit trilogy? Nope. He dropped out just before filming began, another Warner Brothers production. David Yates was obviously kept. I'm going to add, I presume that David Yates was going to do it over Guillermo anyway because he'd done the fifth, the sixth. It's also worth noting that Alfonso Cuarón and Chris Columbus also wanted to come back to do the final film. But again, that did not happen due to David Yates. It sounds like it's a bad thing. It's not. If you've jumped in, you've done the fifth one, you've done a very good job of that. You've done the sixth one, you've done a very good job of that. You should, by default, be given 7 and 8. Like, not to sort of live on what ifs. The concept of Cuarón doing it, I would have been intrigued by. The same of Chris Columbus, but I think for that consistency, I'm quite glad they kept it David Yates at this point in time.
Yeah, it's the old studio safe pair of hands glitch, isn't it? We've seen it a lot. Well, we've literally seen it last week with Marvel and Sean Levy. Like
Yep.
it's a similar concept, isn't it? And David Yates was Warner Brothers' safe pair of hands for this, I think. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Quaron's version, I think, and I think most people obviously have Azkaban as their holy grail of Harry Potter, so I think a lot of people would say that. But yeah, he'd earned the right to do it, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And even sticking with this behind the scenes, we've mentioned we're doing the part one video today. Back on the Goblet of Fire, me and Aaron spoke about the initial conversation of splitting the Goblet of Fire into 2 films. That did understandably not go ahead. That was vetoed by the production team, not just for the expense, but the cast, the age, shooting schedules. that would have probably delayed the rest of the series by like 3 or 4 years. At which point, you'd have people mid-20s playing 16-year-olds. Kind of Stranger Things season 5, if I make that jab. Um, but for the final film, they did make the decision to split it in two. But it originally was declined. So David Heyman had no intention of splitting this film in two until one of the exec producers, Lionel Wigram, uh, suggested it to him. David Heyman would then reread the Deathly Hallows and agree that there was things they could not cut from that book to round out the story. So the decision was made to shoot them both together, rather than a back to back, but releasing one at a time. Everything was shot together and then it was released. I think this was the correct decision, as I mentioned earlier. I think you can get away with it for the final film in the series, whilst I've moaned about a lot of things cut from the Half-Blood Prince. And I didn't moan about things cut from the Order of the Phoenix because I don't think that cut the wrong things, whereas Half-Blood Prince did. Genuinely, with Deathly Hallows, you could not afford to. The Battle of Hogwarts can't be 20 minutes. The Horcrux hunts can't be 5 minutes each. I think they made the right decision. Whether they had their Oppenheimer moment and then every young adult novel film adaptation series in the years that followed would go and do the 2-part finale, the shortest Hunger Games book ending up being 2 films. Obviously, Twilight did 2 films. Did the Maze Runner series even finish, or did they do a part 2? I can't remember, but it
Uh,
became a thing, didn't it?
it got they did 3 films, Maze Runner, didn't they? But I don't think that the last one was a part 1, but I think maybe it was left open ended. I don't know.
But what do you think of this being a part 2? I mean, part 1 and 2.
Um, it's tough, isn't it? If it was made today, it would just be a 3-hour epic, and that would be it. Like we've obviously passed that, and this started that. I mean, obviously it's financial, isn't it? This is why it started, and financially it was obviously the right decision. Made nearly $1 billion. The second one obviously made over $1 billion. So they're absolutely laughing, aren't they? But I think story wise it's okay. I actually think I don't know. I don't think anyone agrees, but I actually think part 2 suffers more from the split than part 1. I find part 2 slightly rushed, and I find part 1 paced really well. And I think that's because I don't know. It feels like they were trying to get to the end because they told people it was split into 2 parts. And when people come for the second part, they're like, "Oh, you know, we need to see the end. We need to see the end." And they were like, "Well, let's just zip through." Whereas that film could have been longer. Whereas for me, I think this one was. I think they covered what they needed to cover. To be honest.
I think that's a really good point. And may I suggest again? I know the film off the back of my hand, but I haven't rewatched it for this series yet. Are you by any chance talking about the fact that I'm pretty sure they're in and out of Gringotts within about 25 minutes of part 2?
Yeah, it's the start. It's
Yeah.
the everything up to the Battle of Hogwarts for me. Obviously, we're talking about part 2 now, but we're on about part 1.
No, it's part of it.
Because
I agree.
it's one film, yeah, exactly. Like for me, the start of part 2 is remarkably rushed. Everything up to the Battle of Hogwarts for me is like, oh, what are we doing? Um, and
Whereas
then
this is
yeah,
patient.
whereas I like the patience of this, and there's detractors of this film. I do feel like maybe the detracting comes from the fact that people were slightly pissed off at the time that it was a part 1. People want their fix, don't they? They want everything, which is absolutely fair enough. Especially when the book is a whole entity in itself. Um, and I know people have issues with I guess the middle of this film. I think from the moment that they leave the wedding, and then the sort of different forests and the camping scenes, and that sort of middle bit where Ron leaves and comes back. But I quite enjoy I enjoy I said at the start, but like I enjoy the adult drama of those
Yeah,
bits. Um, and I actually enjoy, I don't know, I quite enjoy the quietness of those bits as well. Harry Potter is such a film series of spectacle and, well, obviously magic and, lots of set pieces and carnage. So to have a few bits more pieced in like conversation, which makes sense as they're growing up into like older teenagers, I think it works for me.
I think that's a very good point and a great segue, because if we go into the wizard world building section, which didn't exist for the Half the Prince, and in almost every film before, you've had a huge thing, the Ministry of Magic or Hogwarts itself, Hogsmeade, all these things. This is the Harry Potter film where we don't go to Hogwarts. Pretty much, we get the Hogwarts Express, a couple of cameos because they've got to still say the students at school, but I really like. I guess this is rooted in the original novel that guess what, we're not going to Hogwarts until the end of this book, or that the second act of the part two film, and I think it adds to the ending of the Half-Blood Prince and the rest of the film that we need to search for these, from the film perspective, these unimaginable items that are Voldemort's body. We can't go back to school because what we're going to endure on is beyond. And I think Half-Blood Prince teases it really well, where Dumbledore's sort of traveling a lot, and obviously at the end, leading into his death, you obviously go with him to the cave, and you find out where he's been traveling to has been to try and find these Horcruxes. I really like what this film does with that, and kind of alongside the trio being rooted in this sort of desperate search with no knowledge, no real advice or help. The political side of it, where you basically had the rise of the Nazi Germany type thing going on with the Ministry of Magic. There's so much world building in this film alone, and I don't think this is given credit for that. I'm sort of specifically thinking of the scene at the Ministry of Magic where, oh, it's obvious the statue's gone. They're doing trials on people to see if they're pureblood or not. And I think this does a lot of heavy lifting to once again, like, subconsciously build up to this big finale of, hey guys, we know Voldemort's evil. We've showed him kill people. Now we'll show him in power with his people. And we'll create this world which people have been scared of for X amount of years because of what happened before. I think this film does a phenomenal job. And I know I've sort of just converted the Horcrux hunt into this as well. I really appreciate what they do with the film in that perspective. And the forest stuff as well, I love. I understand people disliking it. I understand, how do I say this unsnobbily? As people that are maybe more into film than others, is that fair to say, me and you? Than maybe a generic Harry Potter fan, as in a Harry Potter fan, not a film fan.
Yeah, I think you're saying that people might find it slow, I guess. That's what it.
Yeah. And, they expect Hogwarts, they expect action, they expect this, and this film isn't doing that. And I think one of the reasons this film maybe suffers is actually of the failings of the Half-Blood Prince, because the Half-Blood Prince failed to, if I'm honest, I said it in that video without sort of repeating myself, the Half-Blood Prince details what those Horcruxes are when you read the book. They're these very specific items, but they are, raving. I mean, it's announced in part two, but like Slytherin's locket in this film is just a locket, but you understand the significance of Voldemort's goal is to be the most powerful. So to him, if he can corrupt the Hogwarts founders' things, that's like the prized possession, and that sets the sense for Harry to know in part two. If I come across this really rare locket, I know that's Slytherin's locket. I know that's attached to Tom Riddle. And I've gone on a really weird tangent there, but if those things had been detailed a bit more in 6, I think maybe part 1 could have benefited a little bit more as to how they were corrupted by the Horcruxes. But that doesn't take away my enjoyment of what they do, because it still takes them out of their environment and puts them somewhere else. And I think it does probably the best job at developing the trio since the Philosopher's Stone, which is a very ambitious claim from me.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most. Yeah, it's almost like the most acting they have to do probably since that. Yeah. I think, not to say like, I mean, Hogwarts is a comfort zone, but I guess maybe for them as actors, Hogwarts is a comfort zone, I guess, and like they know exactly how to hit the story beats there, but taking them away, and like you're talking about the locations, I think that's a real win for this film as well. I think every little set piece does work, and I think that's a little bit of what I think lacks in part 2 is as you talk about the ministry scene, which I should have timed it, but I don't know how long it is from start to finish, from when obviously they get when they drink the Polyjuice potion to when they leave and end up in the forest. But it cannot be longer than
10 minutes,
10-12 minutes, something like that. But that's tight and great, and we get everything we need in there. And it hits the beats really nicely. And like for part 2, for example, I would have loved something like that about what was going on at Hogwarts at the time. With Snape as headmaster and those two, I can't remember what they're called, but the
Finchy from the office.
Yeah, disciplinarian sort of people. Like something like that to start part 2 would have been great, I think. And sort of take the wins that you saw in the first one, but I guess that all happens in the edit when you've filmed them both together, doesn't it? And you're deciding what's going part 1, what's going part 2, what I imagine there was a lot that ended up on the cutting room floor as well. But I think the sparseness, like what you're saying about the world building in terms of what Voldemort sort of stands for, I guess, I think another massive win for this film is the sparse use of Voldemort. I think they
Yeah,
don't need him, and I think that was a really good idea to not, like, we've seen him kill people. We've seen him kill. I guess we've seen him kill people from the end of four all the way through, um, and like we know his threat. So being able to see what his influence is rather than his, like, looming presence, which we actually do get at the start of this film as well, because it's like it starts. I mean, the first 10 minutes of this film are like extremely like not
uncomfortable.
kid friendly, I guess. It's really that shift because I mean we're 3 minutes in and Hermione's already devastatingly, erasing her family's minds, and then literally 2 minutes after that we're watching Voldemort kill someone at the table. Like, it's, yeah, um, all that stuff sort of works well, I think. I mean, maybe I'm talking about. I guess it's more like maybe my sensibilities as wanting that, but I think if you're like you've done Half Blood Prince already, I think if you call Half Blood Prince like the film of adolescence of them like slowly moving up, I think this is where it just moves straight to adult, and I think we have that all the way through the film. We have that within the relationship that you're talking about with the trio and how we get to see that evolve when they're hunting for the Horcruxes. Even if you do think it could be fleshed out a bit more, which is probably fair, and then through to even the story of the three brothers, like, that's all about death. One of them, not to jump into that, but one of them, obviously, one of them kills himself, etc., etc. One of them has their throat slit. Like, that's, um, yeah, crazy. I mean, is it mad that we were all watching that at 13, 14? I don't think so. I think it's the story was built well enough before that for us to be able to engage, I think, I guess.
I think it's a fair point. I think the Potter ages are fascinating because I was 5 when Phosphorus came out. I
Yeah.
took to the cinema to see it. My auntie that took me, her I'm 10 years older than her oldest. So when they were like, her daughter was like 5 or 6, I'm 15, 16. I'm like, oh, I took you to the cinema to watch Harry Potter. Can I show it to the girls? I'm like, you actually can't show. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not one of the advocates, for age ratings in terms of if they're mature enough, it's fine. But even I was like, I don't think you can really show a 5-year-old the entire film series. Whereas when I was 5, you could show me the Philosopher's Stone, but I don't think I could have seen. I mean, I would have been allowed to because my parents are pretty chill. But you know what I mean? Of that,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I
that
know what you mean.
guidance
It's like
subject.
where is, I guess, like, where is the line, or is there? I mean, we're just getting into a completely different conversation now, but it's like, where is the line when it's something that's based in a world that's fantastical anyway?
Yeah,
I
and
guess,
you're
like, yeah,
opening. I mean, to open with, I mean, talking Malfoy Manor, it's a location that we spend time with in this film. Just to have, I always forget the name of, like, it's like the Eagle's Nest in like World War Two, isn't it? That just this round table of the Death Eaters, the villains, and just Voldemort at the end of it. An innocent teacher hanging in the air to be fed to a snake in the opening scene of your film. And what I think, I know we'll talk the music later, but what an opening! You've got this montage of the heroes setting out on their journey, and it's like, yeah, here's the villains. Like, we're gonna actually spend time with them for a change. We're gonna see what they're up to and what they're doing. And as you sparingly use Voldemort makes him more intimidating. And the fact that he's sparingly used across the series up to this point, this and part 2 of the films he's in the most, and he's probably in what 3 scenes in this, not including the dream sequences.
mm,
And I find it a really interesting take. And again, David Yates bringing back the director, he was so good at the political side of the Order of the Phoenix that you could trust him to do the political side of the government and not making it too. I mean, like Chris Columbus, for example, don't want to pick on him because I love him. The really nice, cheerful 2 Harry Potter films, could you really bring in the Nazis into the Wizarding World and get that fine balance of what's age appropriate and what isn't? And I think it's so subtly done through the likes of bringing back other characters like Umbridge and more. I'll get into a couple of favourite scenes obviously later on per the series, but you mentioned the 3 brothers. Let's talk that sequence because in terms of world building, there's not a lot left you can do in the final book or the final film. Credit where's credit due. This could have been called Harry Potter and the Horcruxes, and it would have worked. But when you bring in another mystery, which is the Deathly Hallows, what are the Deathly Hallows? You kind of looking back as what we do with the series. At this point in time, okay, we're 16 years in the future. You bring in maybe the most iconic mystery within Harry Potter, but in the final entry. I don't think that's really spoken about enough. I know it's the overused tattoo, if I'm allowed to say that. No offense intended for anyone with a Deathly Hallows tattoo. I completely understand why Harry Potter fans do have that tattooed the most, because it's such a simplistic design. But you're bringing in like deep lore, as you mentioned, right? That the three brothers, the Percival brothers, it's a fairy tale to them, but there's some reality in it, and you've got these. I don't want to call them cultists, but these believers in the Deathly Hallows being these real things and not a fairy tale. I love the design and the concept for that. And in this film, I think the sequence that is praised is the animated sequence of the tale narrated by Emma Watson. I know, I don't know if you remember this at the time. For Christmas in 2007, so the Deathly Hallows book came out. It might be Christmas '07 or Christmas '08. They actually released the Tales of Beedle the Bard as a book.
Oh, really?
It was one of those sort of like, or maybe it was the following. It was like the comic relief type things they used to do. And I remember getting that as a present once. I was like, this is really cool because it was the tale from the Deathly Hallows and the other things. I like nerdy stuff like that within such series. But that, this is going to sound like a criticism. That didn't need to be in this film, but it is. And
Is
it
it written
obviously
out
has.
in the book?
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
It is.
yeah. It's done. There's a bit. There's a bit more lore in the book. So, without jumping too far ahead, the invisibility cloak that Harry has. Harry's a descendant of that person with invisibility cloak. So
Hmm.
Harry's family bloodline is the Percival. Is it Percival's they're called? I can't remember the same, but that is Harry's family heirloom, which is that which obviously Dumbledore has at the time of
Hmm.
the Philosopher's Stone. And what the films don't do a good job of is, again, criticizing Harper Prince without going too book centric. The ring, this Voldemort's ring, that's Voldemort's family heirloom, the Gaunt ring. That's actually the Resurrection Stone. And Dumbledore gets cursed because he's been obsessed with getting the Deathly Hallows. That when the chance came as old man and he sees the Resurrection Stone on a ring, he puts the ring on, which curses him with the Black Hand. I understand why the films can't go into that, but it's that whole like lust for power that Dumbledore had as a kid, and it's why he's not the Minister of Magic because he doesn't trust himself with power. Sorry to go on a weird tangent,
It's
but
interesting stuff.
it's the films take from that story what they need to, because what they make in this, which is the same in the book, the core of the story is we cannot let Voldemort get the Elder. He's already a villain. We cannot let him basically get the super ones that no
Mhm.
one can defeat with him with. And I like that even in the final film, you're still adding more against them of the stakes. And to end this film with Voldemort getting that wand, it's as good a cliffhanger as I think you can do in part one. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. I really I do like the ending. I think it rounds off. I think it rounds off part one nicely. I think what you're saying about introducing, I guess, three new extra things. I say they're not extra, are they? Because obviously we know the invisibility cloak exists, and you can say what you want about the confusion that I guess quite a lot of people might have between the Resurrection Stone and the Philosopher's Stone. I guarantee
Yep.
you, there's people with that
I
confusion.
did as a kid.
Yeah, I did as well, which obviously that's a little bit murky water there, but doesn't take anything away from the story and the animation, which for me, I actually genuinely think is the best 3 minutes in the entire film series. I really like that. I really like how it's told, and I really like the animation. Um, and I actually think the best decision they made was, like you're saying, we've already had the Horcruxes, and then you're adding this whole other thing on top. But to do that, I mean, I've literally just finished it, so like a minute ago. And that scene is like an hour and a half in. Like
Yeah,
there's only
it's
about
near the end.
40, half an hour to 40 minutes left. So to not do that at the start of the film helps it as well. Because if we already know about the Horcruxes and then instantly we're told about, you know, and here's the Elder Wand and the invisibility cloak that you already know about, and then here's this other stone, I think that could have got very convoluted for a film that's already, 2.5 hours. So to let them build to that was another
Yeah,
like good story decision, I think.
I agree. I'm going to use this to sort of segue into the next bit, the cut that I know you've not read the book, so I'm not going to chuck on the spot, but like, oh, go moan about a change. Segueing off this conversation, the cut that hurt I've picked for this is the Dumbledore and Grindelwald relationship, not the relationship in the context they were lovers and the author didn't have the balls to actually put that in writing in '07 and just tell everyone after, which is a very fair criticism. Oh, he's gay. You didn't put that in the books. Yeah, but he is. Oh, you're doing a trilogy of films? Well, I'm still going to say he's gay, though. We need the China money. We didn't forget Warner Brothers. Anyway, segue. The Deathly Hallows, this is why I'm jumping into this now. Dumbledore has, when they're releasing the book, and it's this Rita Skeeter, you read chapters of the book in the book. And
Oh,
it's this, the mystery is also in the back of Harry's mind, which is impossible to display on screen, to have the time to do so in film. Harry begins to question Dumbledore. We see visually they're struggling. The will is essentially a riddle to them of what we're doing with these things. And when the book comes out and you're hearing, Dumbledore was almost a dark wizard. His best friend was Grindelwald, who was obviously the original wizarding Hitler. Um, the film, I don't know how to say this right. Grindelwald in this, it ends with Grindelwald laughing and telling Voldemort, haha, Dumbledore's got it. That's where you're going to get it from his dead body. Whereas in the book, Grindelwald dies refusing to give that information over as an old man. And what kind of happened is, I obviously know we'll never get Fantastic Beasts 4 and 5. It ends with Dumbledore beating Grindelwald. So they're lovers as teenagers, which leads to the death of his sister, which obviously the second film explores a little bit more.
yeah.
When that happens in, like, let's say 1916, 18, whenever, they go their separate ways. Dumbledore obviously goes to the light, Grindelwald goes to the dark. Because Dumbledore's in love with him, he physically cannot face him until he's at his worst, which is 1945. In 1945, Dumbledore goes face to face with Grindelwald in what is deemed the greatest duel in wizarding history. Grindelwald has the Elder Wand, and Dumbledore defeats him without it. And that's the only time he'd seen him in 30 years, was to confront that day, and then Grindelwald self-imprisons himself in his own prison. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
and then Dumbledore gets the Elder Wand.
yeah, and then because they loved each other, Grindelwald still is loyal to Dumbledore, decades later as an old man
Yeah,
in the prison cell. And I just think it's not a minor moment in the film because he laughs and cackles, haha, Dumbledore's got it. I understand you can't get into their relationship with one another. You don't have time. But I just wish we'd have had a bit more. So, for example, this might make a bit more sense. Sorry if I'm waffling.
that makes
Victor Crumb. Victor Crumb is in a cut scene at the wedding. Fleur's there. Victor Crumb's there. Obviously, the Hogwarts champions, they all kept in contact. Victor Crumb starts on Luna's dad because he's wearing the Deathly Hallows. Now, the Deathly Hallows ends up being like a swastika for Eastern European wizards, that was the sign of Grindelwald. So to them, it's like, you put the swastika on your arm, so I'm going to actually
makes sense.
beat the shit into you. And I wish the film had done a little bit more to go into that, because I understand it's a part one, right?
Yeah.
And there's no proper payoff. When you get the scene of Harry in part two, sorry, I'm really on a tangent now. When you get Harry in part two with the Resurrection Stone with his mom, dad, Lupin, and Sirius,
Yeah.
it's really random and it's not earned for me.
Yeah, and also
Where,
it genuinely can be quite confusing because I don't
yeah,
think the Resurrection Stone was fleshed out nearly
it's
enough.
not at all.
Yeah.
And in that moment, Harry is the master of death. That's what happens if you got all three, because he by default has the power of the Elder One because he disarmed Draco, which we find out, which we know. He gets into the forest with the invisibility cloak, and he's got the Resurrection Stone, so he becomes the master of death. And the film, I think, again, that's for me to moan about part two. That's the one bit it gets. You know what you mentioned, right? You've got three of the best bits of the film series in animation. There's not a payoff for that in part two, other than the Elder One stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry,
And
it's a
that's
tangent.
but that's fine. Like it literally sort of fits into the whole thing of like you do rush it slightly. I do think that the reason they haven't done that is a Dumbledore problem, and I think that's throughout the
Yes.
whole series from like start to finish. And they obviously made that decision pretty early on. I don't know if it was Chris Columbus or whoever the producers have made the decision that Dumbledore was going to be whiter than white, basically, and like maybe a
Mm.
tiny bit grey as we get into Half Blood Prince, but like never anything more than like a little bit, a bit of a renegade to the Ministry. Like there was never they decided not to show that darkness, basically, didn't they?
Yeah, and a really cool. This isn't a mapped out Easter egg, because I reread the books last year. That's why I'm pretty clued up on it still.
Mm.
When Harry's on the train in the Philosopher's Stone, when he gets the chocolate frog, it actually says on the back, Dumbledore defeated Grindelwald in 1945. Now,
No way.
I'm not saying J.K. Rowling had mapped out the history of Dumbledore, to make a throwaway comment. But I like the fact that 6 books later, that guy that's a passing comment on a chocolate frog 6 books ago, there's actually an entire backstory there. But I agree with what you said. That is a victim of the books not being done before the films come out. That's not the
Yeah,
book's fault. What it does do, context of talking this in 2026, that's the TV show that get the benefit of that they know every character's
yeah,
story arc from day
exactly. Like
zero.
they can't do such a heel turn
Yeah,
from a film standpoint from one film to another, especially when were they releasing 1 year after another? Were they releasing 2 years?
pretty much. It
Yeah,
it became 18-month cycles, so it you know the last book came out in '07, and for context, Half the Prince was being written in '07, '08. So any big changes they made, there's not a lot of time to
yeah,
make that.
exactly.
And even writing this film, they had the WGA strike of '07, '08. So
Yeah,
this was even delayed to be starting written. I mean, it's not that hard to. I'm going to be honest, it's not that hard to adapt Harry Potter book. I'm sorry. Particularly in a two-parter, there's very few things you have to cut. And whilst I've overly elaborated the cut that hurt, the change that worked, it's a cop out, but it's the correct one. The best change they did for this was to make this film a two-parter, because there's almost nothing that they added or didn't do. There's only things that took out. There was nothing. We're making this really ballsy change to the storytelling mechanisms. It's not. It's as I think it's as good a job they can do, because it is a two-party. Didn't Yeah? Sorry to waffle. On the Order of the Phoenix, they can get through a chapter by doing the really cool newspaper transitions. You can't really do that in this one, and there's nothing that's really missed. So the change that worked, making it a two-parter, that very quickly wipes out that part of the show. But if we talk about the characters, I mean, we spoke about the Golden Trio: Harry, Hermione, Ron, played by Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Rupert Grint. I think they're best film as actors with one another. I'll talk about my favorite scene later on, but kind of what we've already said, that this is as you said, it's adolescence to Half a Prince into your adults now, and I think they run with it. That they've not got the security, as you said, of being at the school, of having the other actors around them, or being on the same sets. They do a lot of this on location. They're not. They're probably at Leavesden for a lot of it, but not all of it. I think they actually shot some of it at Pinewood, and I think it certainly Rupert Grint, who I'd like to pinpoint, who I think is a victim of Steve Kloves saying his favourite character is Hermione, giving a lot of Ron's moments to Hermione over the film series. I think Rupert Grint, for the first time since Chamber of Secrets, is actually given a decent amount to work with. And I think it's a shame that he didn't in between this, and he gets some really good moments. Obviously, Emma Watson, Daniel Radcliffe, great in this as usual.
yeah. This is the first time that Ron's not comic relief.
Yeah,
I think anyway. Like even in Half Blood Prince, which is obviously a much darker film than the rest of them, he still has that that whole thing with the love chocolates, etc., potions, all that stuff. Like, and that's still comic relief at the end of the day, and he plays that really well. But he gets to get through that sort of montage scene of the camping and the hunt for the Horcruxes and things like that. And I guess what you're teaching me about the books, but like I guess when you're saying about um, how Harry questions Dumbledore in the books, I guess they give that to Ron in this film,
yeah,
don't they? They allow Ron to question Harry, which gives Rupert Grint some acting to do, which which is good. I think he's good in this as well.
no, that's fair. And I was talking about the Dursleys. This is the last time we get to speak about them on this. They're weaved into the opening montage, which I think is a shame. I'm still more annoyed about them being cut from 4 and 6 for different reasons. I understand. I love the opening montage scene of this film. It sets the tone of what's to come. But people always, I don't know if you've seen the deleted scenes about Petunia. It goes viral every couple of years, where she's standing in the doorway and she's like, "You didn't just lose a sister. Sorry, you didn't just lose a mother. I lost a sister." And it's this really nice character moment, and that was actually cut from the film because they were like, she was ranted to this boy their entire life.
Yeah, she's not
Like
earned
she's
that.
not getting a
Yeah,
yeah, and they've not added the bit that is a shame is, again, Harper Prince doesn't elaborate on this. After the attack in 5, Dudley's been nice to Harry, and Uncle Vernon doesn't want to leave, and Harry says, "After you die, blah blah blah," causing a waste of space. And Dudley's like, "Harry's not a waste of space." Shakes his hand, says goodbye. So Dudley gets a fair redemption, and I'm just giving them this moment, not to moan about changes, just the Dursleys, they're comic relief as well. Like every film they're in, 1, 2, 3, 5, there's comedy with them. They're that simplistic, we're back to a new Harry Potter film, we'll start at the Dursleys, then we'll go to Hogwarts.
Yeah.
This is the one where, like, no, the Dursleys are the ones that go away this time. And they get their farewell. I think they deserved a bit better, but again, with the run times, you've got to make those cuts, and it worked for an opening montage. I don't know if you've got anything to add on them before we move into. We can't even talk about the core teacher segment because we don't spend time with any teachers in this film either.
No, we don't. We don't have any, do we? No, I'd just say, like you said, I think this is the one that doesn't start with any sort of aspect of paint by numbers of what you see in quite a few of them, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll talk about one actress very quickly: the return of Imelda Staunton as Dolores Umbridge, one of the truly great cinema villains. I feel almost 20 years on from Order of the Phoenix. Me and Ren spoke about it in episode 5, talking about it again today. To bring her back in this film was great. I mean, I know it's in the book. Imelda Staunton's gone and played her again for the theme park in Orlando. Like, it's her own ride that she's broke out of Azkaban after the films. And that's what this big new ride is at Orlando. There's a legacy there of, I think... Does it sound fair? Like, Voldemort is the best Harry Potter villain. That's like no shadow of a doubt there. But I feel like Umbridge surpasses Voldemort as a villain of cinema and is known widely as this is like a grotesque evil character. That everyone who's anyone knows it. And I love her in these films. And it's so well placed. Like, guess who's head of the Nazi Germany political campaign? It's her sentencing people to Azkaban for not being purebloods.
Yeah, I think people's hatred of her as well is that she's almost a villain of life, because everyone's had a teacher that's been, that sort of teacher, haven't they? So I think everyone brings their own baggage to that character, don't they?
And I love the fact as well, again, I don't care this is display, but she's also half-blood, which makes the whole thing ironic too, which is great. But we have a couple of new characters. We have the Look at Them Now segment, where each episode, I guess, picks an actor, talks about their career 25 years later. Theo, I'm not going to lie, you've got the shorter end of the straw here, because we're 7 episodes in. We've had Harry Melling, Alfred Enoch, Fiona Shaw, Rob Pattinson, Gary Oldman, Tom Felton. That's 6 big names that you can't talk about, unfortunately. But which actor would you like us to take a look at the work they've done since?
I actually, obviously, I read you sent me the list of the ones I couldn't have, but I was pretty lucky. Obviously, we get that scene at the start of this film where almost every character is in one room, which was obviously great. So I was looking around, and my guy Donald Gleeson, I think he stands out to me. He obviously is barely in the film, like we're clutching at straws, but if you look at what he's done since, I mean, we go through Anna Karenina, About Time. He's got one of the, I would say, most well-known Black Mirror episodes. He's got Ex Machina, an absolute classic, which I love. He was in Brooklyn as well. He obviously is in The Revenant. Tom Hardy and Leo obviously stand out in that, but Donald Gleeson's really, really good. And then obviously Star Wars, which ranged from 2015 all the way through to 2020. Less said about what they did with General Hux and Rise of Skywalker, the better. But yeah, he's still in there.
I'm glad you picked him, because you're right, he pops up, and it's like, this character we brought in like 4 books ago, we actually need him in the final film. And it's just like, hello, I'm the other Weasley we never spoke about.
Yeah, I'm getting married. Great, yeah.
I'm getting married to, yes, that's right, the girl from the 4th film that none of you know about. I know he's got a bit more to do in part 2. I really like Donald Gleeson. I love the fact he's acting with his dad in this, by the way. That's a great thing. Very small role, but as you said, you look at his career post-Potter, this is one of those actors where people then go back to, like, he was in Harry Potter?
Exactly.
He was that character?
He's one of the classic, I know that guy actors, isn't he? Even if some people don't know his name, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's a great. I'm really glad you picked him. I think he's a really good choice. I'll be taking on the pick for the last episode, so I get the last one. There's a couple I've had my eyes on, so I'm glad no one's picked them. I've got to thank Aaron for making sure he picked Rob Pattinson and Goblet of Fire, because that would be a lost cause if we hadn't had it. But
I would
John
have
Gleason's
absolutely
really good
picked
show.
Rob. Would have been my number one, 100%. If
It was out of Rob and Tennant, which, if I'm allowed to say it nicely, that's probably the two biggest actors in terms of post-Potter careers, and they both did one film each. Um, but I don't know, Donald Gleason, what a pick. General Hooks, yeah, as you said, the less said about episode 9, the better. But in terms of episode 7, yeah, you basically bring out the neo-Nazi,
yeah,
and he's phenomenal at being a neo-Nazi in Star Wars. Love it. Not what they did with him, love what they started him with. But as I said, this is a part one. This is a bit shorter. We'll play that game. We're going to talk the score, and this time around, Alexandre Desplat takes over. Now, there is some behind the scenes on this. John Williams was in talks to return to do the final 2 Harry Potter films, obviously being in part 1 and part 2. He would actually have to decline it due to his commitments on Tintin, Warhorse, and I think something else. Obviously, this is the legendary John Williams. I've said this every episode, so I'm repeating myself. The quality of scores in these films is phenomenal, but the people past John Williams don't get the credit because he's John Williams. The score to the final 2, and I know this is part 1 in particular, doesn't get as many of the big motives people talk about, like Lily's theme or whatever. One of my favourite cues in all of Harry Potter's, and this is a really specific thing, is the ministry sequence when I think he's called Yaxley, when he's chasing them to the fireplace. The music in that scene is so good. I remember seeing it the first time; it was so tense. You don't know what's going on. It's a really well directed scene, but obviously Alexandre Desplat has had a phenomenal career as a composer, and I think it's a massive coup for Harry Potter that people don't talk about. But the music in this is exceptional. But that scene in particular of the ministry, I love it so much.
yeah. He's like, I mean, it is a bit of a coup, isn't it? I mean, you talk about Lily's theme there. That's one that always pops up on film and TV playlists, things like that. And I think a lot of his more well-known pieces of the score do appear in part 2.
Yeah,
But yeah, he's an Oscar-winning composer, isn't he? So I mean, what did he win for? He won for The Shape of Water, I think, didn't he?
yeah. Guillermo del Toro again.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There you go. Maybe he thought Guillermo was coming on board.
And Snape to Malfoy Manor, that's one of the other ones. That is almost a theme in itself, isn't it? For like
Yeah,
the Death Eaters theme, which is mad because it's kind of Snape's, but not Snape's. But no, great pick. I mean, listen, we're flying with this, which I don't mind. This is going to be the shortest episode, which isn't indicative of the film's quality. But we're going to talk a couple of favourite scenes shortly and then start to round up. But you mentioned earlier how much money this film made. This box office was $960 million on a $250 million budget, which it says, I'm struggling to comprehend this. It is saying that the $250 million budget was both part 1 and part 2. I categorically can't believe that, and I still think it's $250 million a film. I'm probably wrong. If that's true, it just goes to show how out of control film budgets are this day and age in Hollywood. Obviously, also with the Potter films, so many of the sets have been built already at this point in time. 7 films in, they're fully established at Leavesden. Obviously, the Harry Potter student tour would open, a year or two after, which many people have attended. Favorite scene? I've so carefully held off this, but I want to ask you what yours is first before I go into mine.
it's a chalk pick, isn't it? But the three brother scene that's my favorite, even though obviously it doesn't involve any of the cast. I just think it's the most engaging part of the film.
I think that's fair. I'm a big fan of that sequence. I love for once it wasn't like a traditional like memory thing they do, because let's actually do this creative scene of the silhouettes and death and the shadows and the, I don't know what it's called, like the liquid in water effects.
Yeah, I mean they could have done it. Could have easily been. I can't remember what the memory thing's called. They could have easily done something similar than what we'd seen before. But I think the reason it stands out to me is because it's so different.
Yeah, that's fair. My favorite scene, you might laugh at this. This is the scene that people laughed at the first time I saw it at the cinema. It's a scene that has been memed as the years have gone by. It's not the Ministry of Magic scene. I do love that, what I mentioned with the fireplace. That's like a specific 30 seconds of a 10-minute scene. And I didn't talk about this in the music. Nick Cave's music is used in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. And the song's Oh Children. It is the dance scene between Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson. Now, I think Daniel Radcliffe's gone on record. It might have been the 20th anniversary documentary when he said it's his favourite scene he might have shot in the series, or one of them. But as I've got older, I was the epitome of the immature 14-year-old laughing, this is stupid, they're dancing. And as I've got older, it's my favourite scene of this film and one of my favourite scenes of the entire film series. And it's very deep. I'm not going to get emotional because I don't get emotional talking about it, but it's this impossible, perilous scenario for these two 17-year-olds. And whilst everything's at its worst, their best friends left them. They're just caught in the moment of having a dance and trying to be themselves. I've probably butchered of how other people interpret it, but I think it's a really good scene, and I think as the years have gone by, I gravitate to that. I guess I could say that was my introduction to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, not Peaky Blinders. It was this, although technically the Peaky Blinders theme is in Dumb and Dumber, which people forget. Um, but yeah, anything on that scene? Because I've genuinely not spoken about it on purpose, trying to mask it.
No, yeah, that's. Is it one of the rare cases in which real music is used in Harry Potter? Like I,
The only, I
yeah,
believe,
because
the only
I
case.
can't remember any. But yeah, I actually think it. Yeah, when you if you try and go a little bit deeper on it, I guess when we were all 13, 14 watching it, is it's supposed to make us feel a little bit like as an immature kid being like, oh, what, like why are we watching this, and then as you get older, you realize the scene sort of grows with you, which that sounds wanky, but I think that is what happened, and I think that's why you probably relate to it a bit more now, to be honest, because it's a rare bit of peace and quiet in all of the carnage, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the song choice does a lot. Like, it's not rock, it's not acoustic, it's quite. I'm no like music expert. I've said that a million times, but the choice of song I think is very specific and works for the context of that scene. Like, it's quite desperate, like the
Yeah.
vocal pattern in it, and I think again it adds. It's not what you'd expect. And looking back at a retrospective series, how many films have put a contemporary bit of music in something like that, and then it's aged poorly.
Yeah, it's
You know,
and
I, I
it's a creative swing as well, which we're always happy with that.
yeah, definitely. I'm glad you said that. And if we use that to sort of segue into final thoughts on Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, listen, we've absolutely flown through this. I keep saying that. This is the shortest one by quite a distance. I don't think there's anything wrong with that because it's a Part 1. The film, as we said at the beginning, it does a lot of the heavy lifting for Part 2 to build off, which gets to talk about ABC that died and XYZ that came back and this and that and the other. But nothing that lands in Part 2 works because of this, and I think Part 1 is held under an unfairly perceived banner of not, oh, it didn't have the action scenes, oh, it didn't have this, it's got this, it's that. I really like it. Obviously, if you watch Part 1, you end up watching Part 2. Yes, it's easier to watch Part 2 in isolation than it is a Part 1, but it always gets you pumped for Part 2, and that is its focus of being a Part 1.
Hmm.
It draws the line in the right way. I think Dune, without making a wild comparison, Dune does the same. How Dune Part 1 ends is okay, it's the middle of the book. The characters have just suffered this massive loss, and they're just on the desert meeting some new characters. That's a wild line to draw in Dune. And then Part 2 is the big spectacle, big moments, learning the ways, and two completely different film series, both done by Warner Brothers. But I do think it's interesting how creatively Part 1 and 2 are approached and how they're perceived. And I think this Part 1 is unfairly perceived. And I'm going to add to that due to the fact so many young adult novels then started doing Part 1s and 2s.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the overarching reason why it's perceived that way, is because even though it was the first one to do it, like retrospectively, it's just viewed through the lens as part one, because everything that came after it, Hunger Games, etc., everything did that, and people soured on that over time and soured on it pretty quickly because I
Mm.
mean, that fad did die out quite quickly in the end. But now we look back on it and we're like, it's easy to look back on it and be like, oh, great, part one. Like, whereas the film itself, for me, just stands alone as a, a really effective piece of storytelling that leads into the finale. It's like just the episode before, and I think that
Yeah,
works.
yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And obviously, we've barely mentioned the TV show as well. Uh, when they do get to a season 7, this is going to be the one where it's probably the most similar because they've already been able to flesh it out with probably 5 hours worth of films. which is almost a series in itself. So good luck to them in a nice way. I keep saying that. This is the one which, again, I think, not to get into the TV debate, but you can look at part 1 and 2 as why they're justifying a TV series. Because if you look at part 1 and 2, what they did and developed that, etc., etc., that's a different conversation. The series starts in December. We'll be covering it. Return to Hogwarts at the time this video going up will be next week. We'll be covering that too. Let's see if there's any more announcements past Nicholas Holt's Guild Hero Lock Cups. We've still got a Mr. Weasley to cast, a new Ginny, Dobby, and more. But Theo, it's been a pleasure bringing you on for this. It's been great to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Next episode is going to be Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. As I mentioned, I'll be doing that with Tate. We'll be talking about the big finale, the Battle of Hogwarts, moaning about who died, cried about who dies, and talking redemptions and other things in between. But we're not able to do that without this video. So once again, thank you. Thank you to everybody who's been watching with us. That's going to drop this Friday. Next week's Return to Hogwarts, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.